You automatically check notifications before going to bed and reach for the light so as not to miss the glass on the nightstand. Where we are flying today, any extra beam is not about convenience, but about visibility. In the sky over Hamburg in July and August of the 43rd year, light is a signal read by searchlights and sights, and they do not care why you turned it on. Why does the habit of making your night easier turn here into a risk where every "shine it for a moment" is an invitation to be seen? By the end, you will understand what an almost unbearable experience for a navigator is made of, why even simple movements acquire a price, and how the survival system pushes out everyday logic. If you stay to the end, you will see how schedule, environment, and rules grow together, how they grind down any "I want," and "it is more convenient for me," and why you would not last a day. Here is not a figure of speech, but an honest assessment of the load. We are in the night and day sky over a northern city in the middle of summer of a great conflict. You are the navigator of a heavy Allied bomber, a person with a kneeboard on your knees, with a pencil that leaves on the map not just a line of route, but a sequence of decisions. Before the flight, there is a briefing where separate pieces of the world add up into a route: recognition of reference points, options for detours, the probability of cloud and smoke screens, expected activity of the defense, the boundaries of radio silence. On your table is a set of maps with different scales, a wide strip for entry and exit, a detailed grid for the target area, a spare scheme for departure in case of loss of the formation, designations of landmarks that at night will replace bridges and factory clusters. You keep in your head the coming night as a sequence of ties to time, to the border, one speed, in the corridor, another on approach to the mark, a transition to drift corrections. Your instruments are magnetic course, compass, radio navigation beacons, a ground mapping onboard radar, a simple clock, and a pencil that must hit that very square, even in shaking. Technologies give you the skeleton of a trajectory, but do not guarantee calm. Dense smoke from fires, layers of cloud, your own reflections from strips of metallized foil dropped ahead. All this makes the picture deaf in places. The defense of the city thinks not in terms of you, but of the formation. It is important for it to catch the general pattern, cross searchlights in the corridor, pour a sector with barrage fire, and tear off stragglers from the group. In this game, loners hardly live. Your personal decision quickly turns into a problem for your neighbors. And everything that you are used to solving on the spot must be solved here in advance, on the ground, while it is quiet and visible. Before takeoff, the world resembles a workshop where everything is laid out for precise assembly. At the briefing, you copy time markers into your kneeboard. After how many minutes from takeoff to hold a course, where to move your gaze to the next map, at what point to switch from by landmarks to by time, how to check with a radio beacon if smoke eats the picture. You learn to ask yourself questions before the flight. What will you do if the leader ahead loses altitude? What will you undertake if the approach stretches out? How will you shorten vulnerability on the way out if the return path goes through fire? The hardest thing is to admit that you do not control much. You are subordinated to a general logic, and your freedom is the quality of preparation. You check pencils as carefully as instruments, because the pencil is your language. You put into your kneeboard several sheets with alternatives, because everything you did not have time to think through under a lamp on the ground, you will pay for dearly in the dark. You enter a mode where time ceases to be background. The base lives at high revolutions but does not shout. Commands are short, steps are debugged, everyone knows the path from barracks to hangar and back. Here they do not argue with the weather, they include it in the plan. Here they are used to the idea that even a successful day is just a day without extra losses, and that success is measured not by pretty phrases, but by how many crews will return and how quickly the equipment will again be ready. You look at the table of flights and see not lines but coupled fates. Who is to go at night? Who, in the daytime window? Who, to the doctor? Who, to a unit for replacement of nodes? Your route does not end with landing. It continues in the repair bay, in the staff room, in the lists of those whom tomorrow they put in the first wave. You try to drink and eat still in the daytime, because afterwards there will be no time. You in advance build a mental map of small decisions, so that in the air you free the brain for the main thing. In the air, everything that seemed simple on the ground enlarges to the size of a trial. The seat becomes either too soft or too hard. Every strap must know its hole. Every pocket must know its tenant. The knee board must lie so that under no maneuver will it fall. The sound of the engines turns into a continuous fabric on which you must hear the quietest, the whisper of internal communications, a click of a switch, a change of tone in the neighboring compartment. The body wants to straighten up, but the space answers with cold and tightness. A try to stretch a shoulder responds with a blow of the elbow against metal. Movements are economized and become geometry. You get used to this like to a language. Any extra movement is noise. Any extra second when you looked not where you should have is a loss. The simplest thing, to turn your head, acquires a price, because you must leave a straight line on the kneeboard and not then compute where you lost the course. At some point you realize that it is not you who lead the pencil, but the pencil that leads you. The hand works by itself, the brain outruns the tremor, and this order supports you better than any encouraging words. On the ground, arguments are decided by the staff. In the sky, there is no one to argue with. There is a route, flight level altitude, distance to the leader, intervals that hold the formation with 100 invisible threads. And if inside a thought is born, "Now I will do it my way," you remember how dangerous such freedom is. The city's defense loves loners. They are easier to pick out with light. It is harder for them to hide in the general picture. They are easier to lead until barrage fire stops being an abstraction. You do not slow down without reason. You do not level out for your own convenience. You do not shift aside to see better. Everything you want to try should have been considered on the ground, otherwise they will try you. Being built into discipline seems cold, but it is warmer than loneliness over a foreign city. This cruel mutual dependence is not rhetoric. Chances rest on it. Dry air and the oxygen system make water more desirable than any food. You learn to drink in sips that do not interfere with breathing, do not force you to take off your glove for long, do not require you to find with your lips the edge of the flask in the dark. Water becomes not the quenching of thirst, but a way to maintain evenness, not allowing a sharp failure of strength. Food is not a snack, but control over attention. Chocolate is not about pleasure, about a quick transition from a tremble to collectedness. Caramel is convenient in that it does not crumble and does not stick in the mask. It seems to you that there will be time for everything, but there will not be time for anything if you arrange an extra pause for yourself. You decide in advance where you will allow yourself a sip, where you will wait until a smooth segment, because the brain should not be distracted by looking for the flask when the most difficult is ahead. Cold in the cockpit is not the temperature of air in the habitual sense. It is the constant presence of a draft in the joints. You understand that heating is a cunning distribution of layers of clothing, the competent work of electric warmers, and the discipline of movements. Comfort has no meaning here, only sufficiency works. Fingers may go numb, but must hold the pencil. Feet may chill, but must not bind the pedals. Shoulders may stiffen, but must not turning your head into a feat. You rebuild the body into an economical mode. You learn to find micro-movements that disperse blood without breaking working order. To learn to sit and not fall apart is a craft just like to learn to calculate without a mistake. And if on the ground this resembles a petty struggle for comfort, then in the air, a struggle for accuracy. Over the city, the climate has ceased to be background. On days when below there is flame, The air changes its habits. Smoke lies in layers. In clearings it pulls upward. Closer to the cores of the fires the air becomes viscous, and the glares from the fire retrain the eye to see false horizons. You know how the map works, how to rely on the river, how to check by the corners of blocks. But today the river is a dark silk ribbon without borders. The blocks are a solid gray mass, and rare landmarks cut into the brain like saving islands. You lay too many ifs in advance. If the smoke hides the mark, if the wind leads aside, if the instrument draws strange spots, if the radio beacon makes noise. You were taught to trust the platform, but on such a night you have to believe other people's marks. Ahead, the leaders must work, set lights, leave contours noticeable for the radar, light the sector along which the approach will be built. And you catch the moment when the general system, which someone will call soulless, suddenly becomes your only vision. You love the truth about yourself more than a beautiful legend. And the truth is this: you are not iron. The longer the strain lasts, the more distinctly the brain tries to economize. At this moment, everything is decided by discipline and decisions accepted in advance. You know that you will not have an unexpected surge of genius that will save everyone. You will have an unshowy craft, to look in time where it is necessary, to put a mark in time, to make a correction in time, to keep silent in time. It sounds boring, but it is this that distinguishes return from disappearance without a trace. Did you catch yourself on a micro-landing of attention? You return it not with flattery to yourself, but with a cold procedure. Repeat the steps, check the points, read the internal checklist. In such minutes, every habit you acquired on the ground starts to work in the air, and every weakness plays against you. Meanwhile, the world does not stop advancing from the other side, from within. The body makes itself known. Oxygen dries the throat. The eyes ache from focusing between the instrument and the dark distance. The neck asks for another angle. The teeth respond to cold oscillations with metallic notes. Someone begins to feel nauseous, and this is not weakness. It is the physics of combined vibrations and tension. Someone fights pressure in the ears. Someone notes a tremble in the hands. You know in advance the signals of your own system. What noise in the head means that a micro sip of water is needed. What aching impulse in the shoulders, that it is time to change the seating by a millimeter. What creeping sand under the eyelids, that it is time not to blink more often, but, on the contrary, to close your eyes for a second and open them again. You are not a hero of novels. You are a craftsman who keeps in check the machine, yourself, and the route. Even if you do not speak about it aloud, you feel a sense of duty. It also gets tired. Words like discipline, responsibility, debriefing are dry on paper, but inside they live as a chain of human gestures. Someone handed you a thermos without saying a word. Someone fixed your pencil with a rubber band, seeing that it was striving to roll. Someone adjusted your strap while you were in headphones. These small things do not get into reports, and yet without them, the system does not work. If you ask yourself what holds you in place in the minute when it is scary, the honest answer will be simple. The fact that next to you, someone is performing their part of the work no worse than you, and you have no right to let them down. The system of flights in such weeks resembles a factory where day and night do not replace each other, but compress. Daytime strikes of neighbors tear your sleep rhythm regardless of whether you fly at night. The bass sounds almost without a break. One flight is preparing, a second is landing, a third spins propellers for checks, and each part of the mechanism takes another piece away from silence. You learn to sleep not when you want, but when you can. You learn to eat not when you are hungry, but when there is a chance for an even table and a warm plate. In ordinary life, this would seem like discipline without soul. Here it is, care. Thus you live longer. And when someone gets leave, it is not a reward for a feat, but a strategic pause to preserve the resource, because the resource is living heads and hands. After landing, another kind of work begins, in silence. You sit on a chair opposite people who look attentively and do not hurry you. You talk about the route as if this were a conversation about the weather, where the marked landmarks matched, where the radar picture led aside, where smoke misled, where searchlights suddenly grew quiet, where the same blocks gave different signals. You do not dramatize, you give material for those who will go tomorrow. Mechanics, radar specialists, instructors listen not for sympathy, but for the sake of correcting the plan for tomorrow. It is dry and even cold, but this is how help works, without extra words and without ruinous probably. A dim exactly today is better than a bright boldness tomorrow without facts. Money in such a system lives a strange life. Risk bonuses in pounds sterling do not make you richer in the everyday sense. Here they do not buy calm, it is not for sale. These sums exist as recognition of costs that cannot be measured with a ruler. And if an orienting point is still needed for a peaceful ear, it is easier to speak about them not with numbers, but with comparison. By the cost of the daily bread ration in 2025, this is not luxury, but compensation for systemic fatigue that accumulates faster than one would like. The most expensive thing is not metal and not fuel, but attention, which leaves a person and returns only with rest, and rest is expensive because there is little of it. Health under these conditions is not an abstraction, but a set of managed tolerances. A medic listens to you without extra questions, and knows that it is harder for you to admit weakness than to endure one more sleepless night. He does not seek heroism. He seeks signs of fatigue that can no longer be ignored. He catches early markers of ears, breathing, skin, eyes. He checks whether the gloves have left white marks on your fingers where trouble is already beginning. He looks at your pulse not like a schoolboy, but like a person who will argue with the bosses if you are not ready. You do not bargain with him. You both know the price of stubbornness. On the ground, the doctor is your brake, and the better he breaks you when needed, the less the rest will have to break because of you. Rules on the base are not about petty bands, but about preserving tempo. Letters pass a censor not to offend the addressee, but so that tomorrow you do not find yourself with a surprise where quiet is needed. Information about flights is distributed in doses not for mystery, but for safety. Schedules of leave and leaves of absence are built not by hunch, but by the logic of preserving those whom one cannot replace quickly. This order can be called inhuman only from afar. From inside it resembles complex mechanical music where the place of each instrument matters. And the better you understand this logic, the less energy you spend on inner protest, and the more on what depends on you. In the air you have small rituals. Each of them is simple and clear. Run a finger along the edge of the kneeboard before a turn to make sure the sheet lies flat. Mentally name the next mark 2 minutes before it. Check the fastening of the strap when inside. Everything trembles from an unpleasant foreboding. Instead of staring into the dark, meet the gaze of the instrument's needle. These rituals are not magic and not superstition. They remove the scurf from attention and return it to work. When someone says, "Hold on," in reality, it means do simple things well until the task ends. That is why the moment when something goes completely wrong becomes revealing. You understand that you will not be able to return by the original plan. You look for an alternate aerodrome, check weather bulletins, catch a rare prompt over the radio that they allowed so as not to get an even bigger problem. And here decides what looked boring earlier: meticulousness on the ground, the thought-out nature of alternatives, clear habits in small things. You breathe more often than you would like, but you do not allow breathing to become the commander. You notice how inside the figure that a minute ago was rushing to run calms down. There is no run, there are steps out of which landing is formed. And if the landing happens not where it was planned, this is not a tragedy, but a new task. You again read instructions, meet people who with the same dry calm take you upon themselves, and you again find yourself part of a system where the main thing is to restore workability. All this time, the city below lives its own hours. It breathes smoke, boils with alarm, hides and fights, and there is no romanticism in this. You do not need details to know there are people there too, and their life now is measured by other units. Your work does not cancel the muscle memory of compassion, but you have no right to replace work with compassion. You look where you must and do what you were trained to do. This does not make you a machine. It makes you part of a general solution for which you answer, not with one heart, but with many. At the end of each cycle, you again find yourself in a room where it is quiet. You hand over documents, check signatures, close the kneeboard. Sometimes they ask you about a small thing, such as where exactly a rare clearing appeared, at what second the sound in the headphones shifted by a half tone, at what point the line of the river was perceptible even in smoke. You answer just as dryly, because dryness is the speed of understanding for those who will fly tomorrow. And only then, when you are already alone, you allow yourself a second luxury, to feel the warmth of a mug with both palms. This warmth does not heal but reminds that the world exists not only as a task. You return the mug to the table and go to sleep by schedule. Here they sleep not because they want to, but because the time for sleep has come. Do you know what surprises most of all? How quickly a person begins to consider as normal what yesterday seemed incredible. You get used to the prolonged noise. You get used to the conversation after the flight without extra words. You get used to the fact that kindness equals accuracy and mutual aid looks like a part prepared in advance. And still there is a line beyond which habit rests against a wall. There begins a fatigue that cannot be removed by coffee and jokes. There appear questions to which one cannot answer directly. When they appear, experienced people do a simple thing. They put you on the ground for a little longer than you would like. From the outside, this looks like bureaucracy. From the inside, like care, because the resource of a personality is the same consumable as a part, and it must be replenished. You again remember money and prices and understand. To speak about them makes sense only when it is not about sums, but about the method. Pounds sterling in a payroll are a way to count what in ordinary life you cannot even imagine. By the cost of the daily bread ration in 2025, one can estimate what compensation is that you do not want to receive, but have to. Better not at all than like this, but better like this than not at all. This restrained honesty removes unnecessary shine from the conversation and returns us to the fact. Money here is only one of the languages of recognition of labor and risk. You think about law. This word is seldom recalled at the runway, but it is present in every step. The right to rest is distributed. The right to refuse exists, but is built as part of a bigger right to the safety of all. The right to knowledge is dosed, because its excess is more dangerous than a lack when those who know are a target. The right to a mistake is recognized but not romanticized. It is treated, not discussed. Legal clarity does not sound bravura, yet without it, the base is covered by chaos. And if you think about what we most often underestimate in peaceful life, it is predictability. A transparent tap that gives water when you want it, air in a room that does not sting the skin, a doctor who is available not by occasion, but by schedule, a law that does not change with the wind. These things are not heroic, but it is they that take from fate the right to command us every minute. Now let us return to the question that opened this story. Why is the habit of lighting your way at home safe, and there dangerous? Because at home, you live in a world where light is a continuation of your desire. Their light is a function of the plan. At home you can take a pause, correct yourself, return time. There a pause is a wound in the formation. At home you choose when to speak and when to be silent. Their silence is the rule, and a word is the exception. At home your habits almost never turn into signals for someone else's sight. There any of your habits not coordinated with the task immediately become someone's target. This is the main difference that makes that experience almost unbearable. There are 3 systemic reasons why "you would not last a day in the sky over Hamburg of that summer" sounds literally. The first is the conflict of schedule with physiology. The body wants warmth, water, sleep, and the routine demands the opposite, and it demands it exactly at the hours when the biological clock insists on rest. In everyday life, you build a schedule around yourself. Here, you build yourself around the schedule. And if at home one can allow a slack, here even a small weakness grows into a chain of consequences. The second is the environment that has ceased to be background and has become an active player. The air dries, the cold penetrates into the joints, smoke rearranges winds, turbulence lives its own life. The landmarks you are used to relying on disappear, and in their place are marks that must be caught by trusting the general system. To some this seems humiliating, but in fact it is maturity. You trust not blindly, but because you know how the general plan is arranged, and you are responsible for your peace. The third is rules and the cost of a mistake. Regulations, formation, radio silence, order of precedence, logistics, medical tolerances, all this exists not in order to complicate life, but in order to multiply the chances of the group. The individual optimum often contradicts the general one. The habit, for oneself, is dangerous here. A mistake almost never remains inside one person. It spreads across the system and hits those who did everything right. This knowledge disciplines better than fear. And one more thought about what we underestimate today. We live on platforms of reliability, a water supply that does not break off without warning, a law that does not change according to someone's mood, medicine that is available not only by happy chance, a warm house that does not require bargaining with the weather every evening. These things do not work miracles, but they quietly return to us the resources thanks to which everything else is possible. There in the sky of that summer, everything is different. Every sip, every gesture, and every silence is a choice with its own price. There they turn on the light not when they want to, but when it is laid down, and they turn it off earlier than you have time to get used to it. Between "one can always" and "one can only by the plan," there is not just a difference of habits, but a whole abyss of conditions that you cannot jump over by willpower. Therefore, "you would not last a day" here is not about weakness, but about a mismatch of worlds. And if you are still sure that you will cope, try to live at least a day without the right to move the alarm, without the right to linger in a warm shower, without the right to write to your loved ones, "I will explain later," without the right to an extra beam in the dark. There the plan will decide for you. And by this plan, strangely enough, the chance to return holds.